Hey friends, Adam from Bantha Overland. Today I want to dive into how much we've paid for our Starlink service over the last 6 months and how much data we've used while going camping and traveling with it. I've seen a lot of videos that are comparing the Starlink plans, but I think it really comes down to real world usage. So, how much data did we use? What were we doing when we were using that data? And what's my recommendation for how much data you probably need? Stay tuned in this video as we dive into all the details and stick around to the end where I share my recommendation for how much data to plan on for each day of camping and traveling so you can decide which roam plan to start with.
At Bantha Overlands, we're on a mission to inspire and enable more people to get outside and experience the fulfillment of overland-based travel. Join us as we share our adventures and tips for finding awesome routes and dispersed camping, make our own DIY overland gear, and find our balance of mixing work and play as we try to spend more of our time traveling, exploring, and connecting. All right, so let's dive into it. Now, before we get into how much data I used and how much it cost me, I want to show you just the basics of the two Starlink roam plans. These are the plans that are meant for folks that are traveling in an RV or camping or overlanding or things like that. And just in case you're not familiar with it, I just want to go through it real quick. So on the Starlink website, on the roam page, you can see here a quick comparison. There's really two plans. There's the roam 50 gig plan and there's the roam unlimited plan. And the biggest difference is price. So the roam 50 gig plan is $50 per month, and then it's an additional $1 per gig of data that you use. And the roam unlimited plan is $165 per month, and it's unlimited data. You can use as much as you want. You can use as much as you can. So this is a quick comparison I put together, comparing the Starlink roam plan here on the left with the roam unlimited plan on the right. And so you can see the biggest difference is really cost. Other than that, they both have US coverage, which is really what I'm focusing this video on. I travel a lot in the American West. They both have international coverage for up to 2 months before you have to get into other details and worry about it. They both have coastal coverage for up to 12 nautical miles from the coast. They both work in motion, which means driving or running or however you move. And you can pause service on both of these plans. So if you're not using it for the winter or something like that, you can pause service. And so really it comes down to how much data you need and how much you need to pay for that data. And that's what we're going to get into next. All right, so next, let's look at how much data we actually used. And after I show you that, we'll get into what we were doing while we were using some of that data. So it's currently January 2025, and I haven't used my Starlink. My service is actually paused, so I've paid nothing. But a few months ago, we were definitely using the Starlink every month. And so we're going to skip back a few months, and I'll start showing you how much data we used. So in October, we were at Overland Expo East, and you can see here how much data we used each day. And so this is a chart on the Starlink website. If you have a Starlink, you can log in at starlink.com, and you can find this information under your Starlink device. And so here you can see that for a couple days, we used 5 gigs, and then closer to 10 gigs. And then a few days prior, probably a gig and 2.5 gigs. And so, we were at an event. We were largely just using our cell phones connected to our Starlink. We were just checking email. We were maybe looking up a few YouTube videos. People were coming by and telling us about what they were up to. And, this is just normal life. So modern devices can use a lot of bandwidth. I have an iPhone and I have a MacBook, and they often like to update maps and sync photos and do software updates in addition to anything I'm doing, like just even if it's basics like checking email or something that seems like it wouldn't use a lot of data. So I will be doing another video on how to sort of save some of that data usage on your device. There's definitely some settings and tricks that we've learned. But for now, I just want to show you what happened when we just got our Starlink Mini and we weren't really trying to save any data. And we were just using our devices as we normally would at home, connected to a fiber broadband connection. So you can see here, we're averaging maybe 5-10 gigs a day. If we go back to September, we were just taking a camping trip. And so again, we weren't really working. We were just checking email, maybe downloading some maps. Our devices were doing what they do in the background. And so you can see we were averaging about 5 gigs a day. Now, when I say we, it's normally me traveling with my partner Val. So it's 2 of us, and we're generally using our iPhones and sometimes our laptops. So this is for 2 people. If you're one person, this may vary, and we'll get into how this can vary very widely based on what you do here in a second. But I want to go back to August, which is one other time. Now, you can see here in August, one day we actually used 15 gigs of data. A couple days we used around 10, and then around 5. And so this big spike here, I was actually making another video that I made comparing the Starlink Mini with the Starlink Standard at camp. I was comparing everything from power to size to performance and how much bandwidth you got and things like that. So I made that video at camp because I wanted to compare it in real world conditions. And there's a link below if you want to check it out. And I uploaded that video to YouTube, and it was about 4 or 5 gigs because it's a 4K video. And that adds up really quick. And so it really depends what you're doing at camp. So this day Val and I were both working from camp, and we uploaded that YouTube video. This day we were just working from camp. So I think Val was on some Zoom meetings, and I was just sort of doing some software development and working on some 3D print designs for some of the gear that we sell and make in our store. And so these other days, again, we were just sort of checking email, maybe watching a few videos. Maybe we downloaded an episode of something on Netflix, and that's when we were more in that 5 gig range. So you can start to see this trend, at least for us. 5 gigs, maybe even less, but normally 5 gigs is what we would use in a day. 10 is what we might use when we're working. And 15 gigs or just higher amounts might be when we're doing something special, like downloading a huge thing or uploading a huge thing, or if you were watching hours and hours and hours of streaming videos or YouTube, it would definitely add up. And so this is what we've experienced over the last 6 months as we've gotten the Starlink Mini, and it's pretty similar to what we've seen with our Starlink Standard and our Starlink Actuated in the past. And so I put together a comparison of how much data you might use for some common activities, at least my common activities. And so it really varies. It depends what you're doing. But for email and search, you might be thinking about 1 or 300 megs a day. For downloading offline maps, I use Onyx Off-Road, and I try and download my maps before I leave. But sometimes we're planning an adventure that wasn't planned at the beginning of the trip, and so I'm downloading offline maps, which are very helpful, but can be very large. And so that could be 200 megs to a gig. Streaming YouTube video, it really depends, but I like to watch it in HD. I like to see all the crispy details, and so that could be 3 to 4 gigs if you were watching 2 hours. Similarly, if you were downloading a 10-part Netflix series to watch over the next couple days, probably 4 to 6 gigs. 6 hours of Zoom meetings. A lot of you might be working remotely, and so if you have video and audio on, depending on your settings, this example is standard definition, so a little bit lower quality, but I think sufficient, 2 to 3 gigs over the course of a day. And if you're uploading a 10-minute 4K YouTube video, 3 to 5 gigs. So, it really depends what you're doing. And if you were to wait to do some of these activities till you're connected to Wi-Fi and you're trying to save a little bit of money on your data plan, you could certainly influence these results as well. Now I want to show you how the data we used correlates to how much we paid. So we had 2 recent bills. One was August and September. The August bill was $81.27 and the September bill was $53. So if I go back to my data usage, you can see here that in August I used 53 gigs, and so that's correlating with this bill the next month for $53. And then the following month, here in October, I get billed $50, so that would have been for sort of the September timeframe, and I only used 12 gigs during that period. So, you're not paying Starlink any less than $50 a month, and so if you use less than 50 gigs, you're still paying $50, and if you're going a little bit over, you're going to pay that overage, right? So I wanted to figure out what was the best plan to go with depending on how much data you thought you might use in a given month. And so I put this table together, and it compares how many days per month you're using your Starlink, how much data that you're going to use because of those days, and then what the cost would be with the Roam 50 gig plan versus the Roam Unlimited plan. Now for this, I've assumed that you're using 10 gigs per day. That's the average that I found that I've used. Some days are less, some days are more. So you could redo this formula a little bit if you think you're going to use less than 10 gigs per day, but I think it's a pretty good place to start. And so if you look at this example of 5 days per month, you're going to use 50 gigs, 5 days at 10 gigs per day. It's going to come out to $50 on the Roam plan, or on the unlimited plan, it's going to be $165 because that's just what you pay. Now, if you come down here and do 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, you can sort of see the differences. And the roam cost does not change because it's just a fixed cost plan for unlimited bandwidth. But the roam cost does change because over 50 gigs, you're paying that $1 per additional gig. And so you can sort of see here that, the break even, the point at which you're going to start paying more money than the Roam Unlimited plan is probably around 20 days because the Roam 50 gig plan would cost you $200 for that additional data. And so the way I've come to think about it is if you think you're going to travel 15 days or less in a given month, then I think you should probably start with the Roam 50 gig plan, monitor your own data usage, and you can always switch to the unlimited plan if you need to. But if you think you're going to be traveling more than 15 days per month, I would say think about getting the Roam Unlimited plan. You might still want to start with the Roam 50 gig plan and see what really happens based on your actual usage. But I think that's probably a place you're going to wind up going. One thing to note is you can switch between these plans whenever you would like. If you switch to the Roam Unlimited plan, like halfway into a billing period, you're going to pay a prorated balance on what that would be. So if you switched mid-month, you'd pay about 80 some dollars to switch into the Roam Unlimited plan after paying the Roam 50 gig cost. So in this video, I've shared some of my own charts and information that I've put together, and it's from my Starlink field guide. It's everything you need to know to use Starlink for traveling and camping. I put it together based on the last 3 years of using Starlink in the field. I've owned every one of them, and I think I've learned some tips and tricks, sometimes the hard way. The field guide has over 50 pages of content with images and diagrams and advice from my own travels. I hope it helps you to get the most out of your Starlink. You can download it for free. There's a link below in the video description, and I hope you check it out. And if you have a friend that has a Starlink, feel free to share it with them as well.
I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, put it in the comments below. And if you have experience from your Starlink, put it in the comments as well so other folks can benefit from it. I hope you found that video helpful. If you did, hit the like button so that other folks like you can find helpful content like this. And if you're interested to follow along on our travels as we share our lessons learned, tips, and recommendations from traveling with Starlink, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, I'm Adam from Bantha Overland. I hope to see you out there soon on the trail.